It was a foggy night in the heart of Louisiana, and I found myself navigating the winding backroads that crisscrossed the bayou. The thick mist hung in the air like a shroud, casting an eerie, almost ethereal glow around my car's headlights. My hands gripped the steering wheel, and my heart raced with anticipation as I tried to make my way through this isolated and unfamiliar territory. The dim glow of the dashboard clock read 2:37 a.m., and I couldn't help but curse myself for taking this detour. I had been driving for hours. The road stretched out seemingly forever in front of me. My plan was to reach New Orleans by sunrise, but it seemed the bayou had other plans for me. As I navigated the desolate roads, I noticed something unsettling in my rearview mirror, a pair of glowing, piercing headlights that seemed to emerge from the depths of the fog. At first, I dismissed it as just another late-night traveler on these eerie backroads. But as the miles passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that those headlights were following me, tracking my every move. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I couldn't ignore the creeping sense of unease that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, that I was simply being paranoid on this desolate road, but the headlights grew closer with each twist and turn. I couldn't see the vehicle behind me, just those relentless, glowing eyes in my rearview mirror. They pierced through the fog, their intensity unwavering. I had no choice but to speed up, hoping to put some distance between myself and the relentless pursuer. My heart pounded as I pushed the gas pedal down, my car's engine roaring to life. The old tires screeched on the damp asphalt, and I clung to the wheel, my knuckles turning white. The fog grew thicker, and the road ahead became increasingly treacherous. No matter how fast I drove, those headlights remained locked onto me, never wavering, never relenting. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind as I realized the driver behind me wasn't interested in passing or slowing down. They were pursuing me, deliberately and without mercy. I tried to call the police, but my phone had no signal in this remote part of the bayou. I was on my own, with nothing but the eerie glow of those headlights as my constant companion. My heart hammered in my chest as I contemplated my options, each more terrifying than the last. The road stretched on, seemingly endless, and my mind raced to come up with a plan. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that I had stumbled upon something I wasn't supposed to see. Desperation set in, and I made a split-second decision to veer off the road and into the dense foliage of the bayou. I crashed through the underbrush, my car bouncing and scraping against the rough terrain. It was a risky move, but I had to shake off my relentless pursuer. The headlights followed me into the bayou, casting an eerie glow on the twisted trees and murky waters that surrounded me. I pushed my car to the limit, navigating the treacherous terrain with adrenaline-fueled determination. For what felt like an eternity, I twisted and turned through the tangled web of the bayou, my heart pounding in my chest. The fog clung to the trees like a sinister curtain, and the headlights behind me never wavered. It was as if my pursuer knew this terrain as well as I did. Just when I thought I couldn't take it any longer, a stroke of luck came my way. I spotted a narrow footpath leading away from the main road. It was a risky move, but I took it, hoping to lose my pursuer in the labyrinthine network of the bayou. The path was barely wide enough for my car, and the branches clawed at the windows as I maneuvered through the dense foliage. I pushed my car to its limits, my mind racing with fear and determination. As I navigated the narrow path, I couldn't help but glance in my rearview mirror, dreading what I might see. To my shock, the headlights were gone, swallowed up by the thick fog of the bayou. I was alone, safe, and finally free from the relentless pursuit. Exhausted and shaken, I eventually made my way back to the main road. The fog had lifted, and the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and orange. I drove on, my heart still pounding, my mind haunted by the enigmatic pursuer in the fog. To this day, I can't explain who or what was behind those relentless headlights. I never reported the incident to the police, fearing that I might become a target once more. I've learned to avoid the backroads of the Louisiana bayou, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched, that those glowing eyes are still out there, waiting to emerge from the fog once more. Let's hop on to story number 2, but before I begin reading, make sure that you have subscribed to Mr. Scare for regular horror podcasts. As a seasoned traveler of the winding roads of North Carolina, I had grown accustomed to the quirks and peculiarities that seemed to hide in the shadows of those picturesque landscapes. But one fateful night, as I made my way down Route 72, I encountered something that sent shivers down my spine and tested my understanding of reality. It was a moonless night, and the stars overhead were obscured by thick, looming clouds. Rain poured down in relentless sheets, making the journey even more challenging. The windshield wipers worked tirelessly to clear my view, but the persistent downpour made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. I had been driving for hours, the monotonous rhythm of the rain against the roof of my car lulling me into a sense of drowsy relaxation. It was during one of those moments when I was starting to lose focus that I saw it, the first of the strange symbols. I couldn't quite make out what it was at first. A glimpse of something out of place on the side of the road, illuminated by my car's headlights. It was as if someone had painted a series of symbols, each more cryptic than the last, onto the asphalt. My curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled over to the side of the road. Rain continued to pour down relentlessly, soaking me through as I approached the peculiar markings. They were etched into the pavement with a dark, viscous substance that glistened in the dim light. As I bent down for a closer look, my heart quickened. These were not the markings of road workers or graffiti artists. They were something altogether more sinister. The symbols seemed ancient, almost arcane, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something I wasn't meant to see. The rain-soaked symbols formed a circle with strange, intertwining patterns that defied any logical explanation. In the center of the circle was a figure, half human and half beast, its eyes empty voids that seemed to stare into my very soul. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that this was no ordinary graffiti. It was a ritualistic design, one that hinted at a dark and malevolent purpose. I took a step back, my mind racing with fear and curiosity. I continued down Route 72, the rain beating against my car like a relentless drum. but the symbols haunted my thoughts, like an itch that couldn't be scratched. I couldn't shake the feeling that they held some terrible secret, one that I needed to uncover. As I drove further, the symbols became more frequent, appearing every few miles along the road. Each set seemed more intricate and foreboding than the last, and I couldn't help but wonder who was responsible for them. I began to ask locals about the symbols, but their reactions were cryptic and guarded. They spoke in hushed tones, warning me to steer clear of them, to leave well enough alone. It was as if they too knew the dark secret that lay behind those cryptic designs. Determined to unravel the mystery, I delved into research, poring over books and scouring the internet for any information about these symbols. It was then that I stumbled upon a disturbing revelation, a local legend about an ancient cult that had once called these lands home. The cult was said to have practiced dark rituals, summoning otherworldly entities and performing unspeakable acts in their name. The symbols I had encountered were eerily similar to those described in the legend, leading me to believe that their dark legacy still lingered in the shadows of Route 72. I couldn't help but feel that I was being watched as I delved deeper into the mystery. The symbols became more frequent, as if they were leading me further down a path I couldn't escape. The rain continued to pour, and the weight of the unknown bore down on me like an oppressive force. One fateful night, as I followed the symbols deeper into the heart of North Carolina, I stumbled upon an old, abandoned church hidden deep within the forest. The symbols covered its walls, and an eerie, unnatural silence hung in the air. I approached the church with caution, my heart pounding in my chest. As I entered, I was greeted by a scene of unimaginable horror. The symbols covered every inch of the interior, and in the center of the room, a grotesque altar stood, adorned with the remains of long-dead animals and unsettling relics. I knew then that I had uncovered something beyond my comprehension, something that defied explanation or reason. It was a darkness that had been lurking in the shadows of Route 72 for generations, waiting for someone foolish enough to uncover its secrets. Terrified and shaken, I fled the church, leaving behind the symbols and the malevolent presence that seemed to linger there. I continued my journey, but the symbols haunted my thoughts, a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that I am being watched, that the symbols on Route 72 have marked me as a trespasser into a world of darkness and despair. And as I drive those winding roads, I can't help but wonder if I will ever escape the sinister grip of the symbols and the malevolent force that lurks behind them. It was supposed to be a simple road trip, a chance to escape the monotony of our everyday lives and explore the hidden gems of Colorado. We were a group of 5 friends, bound by a shared love of adventure and the thrill of the unknown. But that night, as we veered off the well-trodden path and into the heart of the Rockies, we stumbled upon something that would haunt our nightmares for years to come. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, casting an inky shroud over the mountainous landscape. The rugged terrain stretched out before us, and the glow of our headlights was the only source of illumination in the darkness. We had been driving for hours, our laughter and chatter giving way to a contemplative silence as the isolation of the wilderness enveloped us. It was Jordan, our resident navigator and thrill seeker, who suggested the shortcut. "Trust me," he said with a mischievous grin, "this is the way to some real adventure." The narrow dirt road he guided us onto wound its way through dense forests and steep inclines, each twist in turn taking us further away from civilization. The air grew cooler, and the silence of the wilderness pressed in on us, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves or the hoot of an unseen owl. As we rounded a particularly sharp curve, our headlights caught a glimpse of something that sent shivers down our spines, an old, weathered sign with the barely visible words Silverwood, EST 1873. Silverwood? Sarah, the most cautious of our group, questioned with a hint of unease. "I've never heard of this place. Are you sure this is the right way?" Jordan, ever the adventurer, assured us that this was the shortcut he had intended, although he too admitted that Silverwood was a mystery to him. Ignoring our apprehension, we continued down the road, curiosity getting the better of us. As we ventured further into the darkness, the dirt road gave way to a path that was barely discernible. Our headlights carved through the night, revealing a town that time had forgotten. The buildings of Silverwood loomed like specters in the night, their windows shattered, and their wooden frames decaying with age. We parked our car at the town's entrance, our excitement mingled with trepidation. The moonlight cast an eerie glow over the abandoned buildings, and the rustling of leaves in the breeze seemed to whisper secrets of the past. Sarah was the first to step out of the car, her flashlight cutting through the darkness like a beacon of curiosity. We followed her, our footsteps echoing in the stillness. Our flashlights revealed glimpses of a town frozen in time, a dilapidated saloon with shattered glass, a deserted schoolhouse with desks overturned, and an ancient, crumbling church with a shadowy steeple that seemed to reach for the heavens. The air was thick with an unsettling presence, and I couldn't help but feel that we were trespassing in a place that had been abandoned for a reason. But the allure of the unknown was too powerful to resist. As we explored further, we stumbled upon a dusty, weathered journal, its pages filled with handwritten entries that dated back over a century. The journal spoke of strange occurrences in Silverwood, disappearances, unexplained phenomena, and a pervasive sense of dread that had driven the town's residents to flee in the dead of night. The final entry, dated 1892, sent a chill down my spine. It spoke of a darkness that had consumed Silverwood, a malevolent force that lurked in the shadows and whispered to those who dared to stay. The writer begged for forgiveness, as if they had committed some unspeakable act in their desperation to escape. We exchanged nervous glances, realizing that we were not alone in Silverwood. The oppressive silence seemed to come alive with the sound of whispers, and our flashlights revealed fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures that darted just out of reach. Despite our growing fear, we couldn't deny the irresistible pull of the mystery that lay before us. We ventured deeper into the heart of Silverwood, drawn to a foreboding structure that loomed at the town center, a towering mansion, its windows boarded up, and its doors sealed with heavy chains. As we approached the mansion, a sense of dread washed over us, and our flashlights flickered as if in protest. The air grew colder, and a bone-chilling wind whispered through the trees. With trembling hands, Jordan reached out and touched the chains that bound the mansion's doors. As if in response, the ground beneath us trembled, and a deafening roar filled the air. The very earth seemed to rebel against our presence. Panicked, we turned to flee, our flashlights cutting through the darkness as we raced back to our car. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows more menacing, as if Silverwood itself resented our intrusion. We sped away from that accursed town, leaving behind the mysteries of Silverwood and the malevolent force that lurked within. The darkness of the night gradually gave way to the soft glow of dawn, and we found ourselves on the familiar roads of Colorado once more. Years have passed since that fateful night in Silverwood, but the memories of our harrowing encounter still haunt our dreams. We may never know the true nature of the malevolent force that dwells within that abandoned town, but one thing is certain: we will never forget the night we stumbled upon the chilling secrets of Silverwood, a place where the past and present are forever intertwined, and where the shadows of history continue to whisper their dark and enigmatic tales. It was a dark and stormy night in the heart of Oregon. I had been driving for hours, the windshield wipers rhythmically slashing through the relentless rain as I pressed onward along the deserted highway. The clock on the dashboard showed an ungodly hour, and fatigue was gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. But as the storm intensified, I realized that continuing on this treacherous road was no longer an option. The visibility was reduced to near zero, and the howling wind seemed intent on pushing me off the road. I scanned the desolate landscape for any sign of shelter and, to my immense relief, spotted a small dirt road that led into the dense forest. I hesitated for a moment, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel. It was the kind of decision that could save my life or lead to my demise. With a deep breath, I made the choice and turned onto the narrow path that disappeared into the shadowy woods. The forest seemed to swallow me whole as I ventured deeper into its embrace. The towering trees loomed like silent sentinels on either side of the road, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Rain drummed on the roof of my car, creating an eerie symphony that filled the air. My headlights cast feeble beams that fought to pierce the impenetrable darkness. I drove cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest as my imagination conjured all manner of horrors lurking in the shadows. The forest was an entity of its own, and it felt as though it was watching, waiting. Just when I began to wonder if I had made a grave mistake, I came upon a small clearing. There, nestled beneath a canopy of ancient trees, was a weather-beaten cabin. Relief washed over me, and I pulled up to the cabin, praying that it was as abandoned as it appeared. I stepped out of the car and approached the cabin cautiously. The wooden structure creaked ominously in the wind, but it seemed to offer refuge from the storm. As I tried the door, it swung open with an eerie, reluctant creak, revealing a dimly lit interior. My flashlight revealed a sparsely furnished cabin frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture, moth-eaten curtains, and faded photographs adorned the walls. It was as if the owner had simply vanished, leaving their life behind. Exhausted, I lit a fire in the old fireplace and settled into a tattered armchair. The crackling flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the storm outside raged on, the wind howling like a wounded beast. As I stared into the flames, a sense of unease settled over me. It was as though the forest itself was pressing against the windows, whispering secrets I could not comprehend. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind, seemed to carry a sinister weight. Hours passed, and despite my fatigue, sleep remained elusive. I was on edge, my senses heightened to the point of paranoia. The storm showed no sign of relenting, and the cabin felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. Then, just as I began to consider braving the storm once more, I heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the cabin. My blood ran cold, and I strained to listen, my heart pounding in my chest. The growl grew louder, joined by a chorus of unearthly whispers that seemed to echo through the cabin. Panic set in as I realized that I was not alone in that desolate place. I fumbled for my flashlight, casting its beam around the room, revealing nothing but the decrepit interior. But the sounds persisted, growing closer and more menacing with each passing moment. Summoning every ounce of courage, I approached the cabin's only window. As I peered outside, my breath caught in my throat. Beyond the rain-streaked glass, I saw them, shadowy figures moving silently through the trees. Their eyes gleamed with an otherworldly malevolence, and their grotesque forms seemed to shift and blur, as though they were not entirely of this world. They were approaching the cabin, their presence filling the air with dread. In that moment, I knew that I had unwittingly stumbled upon something beyond my comprehension, something ancient and evil. With my heart in my throat, I extinguished the flashlight and retreated into the darkest corner of the cabin, praying that they would pass me by. The minutes stretched into hours as I huddled in the darkness, the sounds of the forest and the approaching figures growing louder with each passing moment. I could feel their eyes upon me, their presence pressing in from all sides. And then, just as suddenly as they had come, the figures retreated, melting back into the depths of the forest. The growls and whispers faded into the distance, leaving only the relentless storm as a testament to their passing. I waited in that cabin until morning, my fear keeping me rooted in place. When the first light of dawn broke through the windows, I gathered my courage and ventured outside. The forest was still, the figures gone without a trace. I quickly made my way back to my car and resumed my journey. The memory of that nightmarish encounter burned into my mind. To this day, I cannot explain what I witnessed in that forest, and I dare not speak of it to others. But one thing is certain, I will never forget the night I sought shelter in the woods of Oregon, where the darkness hides ancient terrors, and the storm conceals the secrets of the wild. It was a moonless night in the heart of Texas, and I had been driving for hours on the desolate highway that stretched endlessly before me. Fatigue weighed heavy on my eyelids, and I knew I couldn't push any further. I needed rest. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, a flickering neon sign appeared in the distance, casting an eerie glow on the deserted road. Lone Star Motel, it read in fading letters. Relief washed over me as I veered off the highway and into the motel's gravel parking lot. The place had seen better days. The once bright neon lights that adorned the facade were now dim and barely illuminated the surrounding darkness. A tattered American flag fluttered feebly in the wind. It was the kind of motel you'd see in those old, forgotten road trip movies, the kind that hadn't seen a guest in years. I parked my car in front of the motel office and stepped out into the crisp night air. The Texas wind carried the faint scent of oil and dust. I approached the office, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, and I was met with a scene frozen in time. Faded photographs of happy families on vacation adorned the walls, their smiles a stark contrast to the motel's current state of disrepair. The man behind the front desk looked just as out of place as the motel itself. He was old, with wisps of gray hair clinging to his scalp and tired eyes that seemed to have witnessed a lifetime of forgotten travelers like me. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need a room for the night," I replied, my voice carrying the exhaustion I felt. He handed me a tarnished key and mumbled something about the last room at the end of the row. As I turned to leave, he spoke again, his words sending a shiver down my spine. "Be careful," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "This place has a history." I nodded, not fully comprehending the weight of his words, and made my way to the room. The motel's exterior seemed to crumble with each step, and the wind whispered through the cracks in the walls. When I reached my room, I fumbled with the rusty key before finally managing to unlock the door. The room was as outdated as the rest of the motel, with a threadbare carpet and faded wallpaper that had once been a sickly shade of yellow. I didn't waste any time. I locked the door behind me and collapsed onto the lumpy mattress, the exhaustion of the road lulling me into a restless sleep. I awoke to a strange sound, a soft, mournful melody that seemed to seep through the walls. Groggily, I sat up and strained to identify the source of the music. It was coming from the room next door. As I listened, the melody became clearer, and I realized it was a woman's voice, singing an old, hauntingly beautiful song. I couldn't make out the words, but the tune sent shivers down my spine. It was as if the very walls were singing. Curiosity got the better of me, and I left my room, following the sound of the music. It led me to the room next door. The door cracked open just enough for me to peer inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. The room was empty, save for an ancient phonograph in the corner, its needle tracing the grooves of an old vinyl record. But there was no one there, no woman singing, no one operating the phonograph. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The record player looked as though it hadn't been touched in decades, and yet it played on, the haunting melody filling the room. I reached for the needle, my fingers trembling. The moment my skin made contact with the record player, the music abruptly stopped, leaving me in a deafening silence. I retreated to my room, my mind reeling. What was happening in this forsaken motel? Who had been singing that eerie song? I tried to shake off the unease and get some rest, but sleep eluded me. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind, seemed to carry with it a sense of dread. Hours passed, and I lay there in the darkness, my eyes fixed on the ceiling. That's when I heard it, a soft, mournful melody, just like before, but this time it was right outside my door. I froze, my heart in my throat, as the singing drew closer. The door to my room seemed to vibrate with each note, as if someone, or something, stood just on the other side. With trembling hands, I reached for the doorknob, my breath caught in my chest. The singing grew louder, more haunting, and as I flung the door open, I was met with an empty hallway. The melody continued, echoing through the motel, but there was no one to be seen. It was as though the very walls themselves were singing, as though the motel had come alive with an otherworldly presence. In a state of panic, I gathered my things and fled the room, not bothering to check out. I didn't care about the rest of my journey. I just needed to escape that place. As I sped away from the Lone Star Motel, the haunting melody still lingering in my ears, I couldn't help but wonder about the motel's dark history. What had happened within those walls to leave such a mark? What unseen presence had I encountered that night? I may never have the answers to those questions, but one thing is for certain. I will never forget the night I sought refuge at the Lone Star Motel, where the past is very much alive, and the walls themselves sing a mournful song of the forgotten.